I do find these pre-made styrofoam shapes, or we've got some extra time to kill, like we all do now. It could be a fun project for an afternoon or a weekend. Yeah, sometimes you get something kind of nice out of it at the end, even though it's, I would hesitate to call it art, but maybe it won't be garbage. I got some of these styrofoam bunny rabbits. Thought I'd try casting one. I don't want to just stick a sprue on this and cast it, because this is a very large chunk of metal. There'll probably be all kinds of shrinkage issues with it. Plus, it's just a waste. I thought maybe cut it in half and use the halves to make each end of a set of bookends. I thought maybe tear out the foam in the middle and hollow it out. And that's the option I actually decided to go with first. So away I go. Start picking away, trying to leave a pretty even wall that's not too thin and not too thick on the inside. But trying to do it all from down here, it's a little difficult. And if you're not careful, you wind up tearing through. So what I did was I actually did get one and cut it in half. And then I picked out the inside foam from each half, hot glued the halves back together. Now there's a few gaps. Let's see if I can get you a good look right there. I have some paste wax that I had used before to smooth out styrofoam patterns and had pretty good results with. So on this whole seam around it and in that crack there, and you can see in some of these little pits between the styrofoam beads, I tried to add just a little bit, but I did that a few days ago and now it's completely dried and it's starting to shrink and peel away. So I think what I'm going to do is, just before I go to cast it, I'm going to give it another, just rub a little more of that wax. It gets really liquidy when it warms up a bit, and you can use it to easily fill in these cracks. And it can dry out, but as long as it doesn't dry out for a long time and shrink, then it should still fill up those holes and leave me with a nice smooth surface on my casting. As long as you don't use too much of it, it doesn't mess up the casting, but you don't want to put it on too thick. These edges here are the ones that were pretty rough styrofoam after I cut them to make the patterns for this, and this is where I used that paste wax before. And I think it left a finish that's comparable with the rest of the casting, which was much smoother than the styrofoam was here when I molded that thing. So that's why I'm using that wax again here. Well, got this guy sprued up. New coat of wax on him to fill those little tiny, the seam line and the little pits. We'll see how it turns out. That's kind of a new technique for me, so we'll see how it goes. Actually, I'm going to fill up the hollow part first. That seems like a good idea. Glad I sifted this stuff all so well last time. It's going to flow nicely around the pattern. Perfect. There we go, ingot mold. Silicon bronze. My carbon monoxide meter powered on, so I'll have some readings this time. But because I'm melting bronze this time, I'm going to run the furnace just a little on the rich side. Down this low, maybe even less, but well, I don't know. Actually, I heard carbon monoxide falls, but you know, I'm kneeling down here in front of the camera, behind it. Got 15, 17 parts per million of CO, which is not bad. I got the alarm set to go off at 100. So far so good. Pretty sure that's no good. Sand float again. God. Oh boy. That's a fail, I'm pretty sure. Currently 6 parts per million carbon monoxide in here. Pretty good. Glass stuck in his ear. It'll be a little trickier to get out. Most of it's coming off with just a little gentle tapping. So it looks like it was this part here where the float happened. It's possible it's still hollow inside under that. If I can cut this off or something. Well, I got Mr. Bunny Rabbit cleaned up halfway decently. Got most of the melted glass chipped off it. And I managed to saw him off most of the mutated sand floated part. You can see his double chin and his chest and his little feet are still kind of down here, but it puffed up from here, and the top part of it was lifted off. So I did wind up with an okay bunny. There's some stuff here that's not meant to be there. It's kind of annoying, but I could maybe conceal it somehow or grind it off. There's a little bit of that stuff on this side too, but you'll notice he cuts off right under his nose. This guy has a whole torso or whatever underneath that, and so was he meant to. Also, the inside of it puffed way up, it floated. This thing is really heavy. There's still a little bit of glass inside some shrink holes deep within this massive chunk of bronze, which was not intended. Once again, look how deep this one was hollowed out. This one ought to have been close to the same. I could use this, but it's so much extra bronze that it took up, and it's not perfect the way I wanted it. Anyway, I think it's only good to remelt. So these guys will end up back in the crucible at some point. Now, I think part of the reason this floated up was because when I vibrated the sand bucket, tapping on it, etc., the styrofoam might have insulated the sand inside itself, the loose sand core, so to speak. So that stuff wasn't as compacted, and it was able to, the molten bronze has enough mass behind it, the hydrostatic pressure was easily able to make that sand float and make way for the frozen surface of the bronze to be pushed upward by molten bronze from beneath it. So I'm going to try again in aluminum. This time I did not cut it in half first, I was just more careful. I did poke through one spot right there in the crook of his ear, but I can put a little bit of that wax, paste wax in to seal it up. This one also has pretty severe pitting between the foam beads, which is why I didn't pick it first. This was the best one of the bunch, but I poked through. Oh, speaking of that wax, it worked really well. You can see a little bit where the ear had broken off before and I glued it back on, but it's almost fully concealed. Parting line is just about gone, and there's no sign of any styrofoam bead texture on it, or very little in any case. So I'm definitely going to be using that technique again on this new one, because he's got some little divots between the foam beads, especially there on his underneath his cheek. Little pits here and there. But you know, it only takes a tiny little bit of wax to fill those in and make them smoothed over, and if it's only that little, it doesn't seem to affect the surface quality of the casting at all. So this time I'm spruing this one up. I'm going to bury it like that with the ears more or less parallel at the bottom, and try to pour fast enough this time and hope for the best. And use aluminum, which is not nearly so massive as bronze. I get a lot less problems with sand float when I'm casting aluminum lost foam. Alright, so here we go. So here's Mr. Bunny with his first coat of wax. See, I kind of smeared it over the whole thing, but focusing on trying to fill in the deepest of the little pits. Now it's dried up, and some of the excess waxes that was just in the real thin film has turned kind of crusty and come loose. So I'll brush some of that off and then give it another coat to finish filling in those deepest pits, and just kind of stop there from being little like foam bead shaped lumps all over it, ever so slightly but visible. Hopefully I'll end up with a pretty smooth, natural looking, non-styrofoam textured rabbit in the end. Alright, well, that pour seemed to go a lot better. I had the meter set to hold the maximum value, so 20 parts per million was the highest it got in here. Pretty good. I mean, the recommended max for an enclosed space, you're going to be in there for 8 hours, is 50. And this is 15 minutes worth of flame here, so pretty happy. And I think this pour worked out a lot better too. I don't think it didn't float, and I didn't have any issues with keeping up with the sprue draining out. Pretty sure I kept it choked the whole time, but we'll come back and see. Well, I am going to have to brush off the little bits of sandy, glassy stuff. Well, I rinsed him off. He's all there. Didn't distort or anything. There are a few little lumps and bumps. And the areas where I put the wax in, you can see it, a discoloration that shows where the low spots were, where the wax was. But if you kind of look at it in a profile, I don't think it actually, it's just the color of it. I think if I give it just a little bit of a wire brush, that may just disappear along with the little bits of sand and stuff that are still stuck to the surface. On account of I don't use coatings on this kind of stuff. Anyway, I'll clean them up a little more and maybe take some more pictures later. Well, as you see, the wire brushing did get rid of the discoloration from those wax, I guess, from burning wax. I still do have a bunch of defects here where the metal penetrated into the sand somehow. So I'll show you how I'm going to deal with that. It does leave some weird shiny spots, but you'll notice I already did it on this side, and I take it back to the wire brush, and it does a pretty good job of blending that stuff in. You know, you can maybe tell I did some filing right here, but the wire brush gives it back that little bit of texture so that it doesn't really jump out like it does here. So I'm going to go try and do the rest of this as much as I can, as best I can, and I'll bring you back. Well, my file didn't want to get in right here, but as for the rest of it, I think it worked pretty good. You can't see too many filed, shiny, smooth spots that don't just look like this kind of sandy texture. I mean, I could do a little bit more work on it too. There's some a little bit rough in there, but it's not, you know, it's not like that stuff. I could live with it. But I might do a little bit more. Maybe I'll get a Dremel with a sanding drum and get into some of these weird little curved areas that the file can't reach. But if it works as good as the rest of this has, you know, I was thinking about trying to really sand this smooth and buff and polish it, but I don't think so. I think I like the sand texture with the wire brush applied. Yeah, I might just keep it like this. Well, finally got them all cleaned up, polished a little bit. I filed and sanded off all those bumps, at least the worst of them. I didn't try to get a mirror finish or anything, because I like the kind of little bit of, you focus, I like the kind of little texture it's got to them. This was the worst of it here. It cleaned up pretty good, and the wire brush did a pretty good job blending the filed and sanded spots back in. Pretty happy with it. After I polished it, I gave it a little coat of that paste wax so that it wouldn't, just to kind of seal it from the oxygen in the air, so it would hopefully stay shiny for a long time. I got the mounting hole drilled and tapped. And I made a little base for him, which should be pretty easy to attach if I get lucky and this washer fits. I'm home free. I need 2 hands to do that, so I'll be right back. And there we have it. So, well, yeah, he's a little bit up off it, but it went in nice and smooth. I wonder if I should, maybe I tightened him down a little too tight, and that's why his front feet lifted up a bit. I'm not too worried about it. This thing's not going to move. Anyway, there you have it. A good one, and a not so good one.